Well, welcome, friends, as we come back to the Bible for Dummies here at Chapel by the Sea on Fort Myers Beach, Florida. I'm Dr. Jim Berger. I'm the interim pastor. Thank you for joining me, and in person and online. Now, remember, when we talk about the Bible for Dummies, the history of the Bible, we're talking the story. We're talking the chronological beginning to end. But in fact, the Bible's not organized that way, so it can be confusing. Today, we're going to talk about the part that we never look at because it's not in our canon of the Bible. It's in the Catholic canon, it's in Jewish, it's in other canons, but it's not included with ours. These are books written between 540 BC and the time of Jesus. But it's a very important time. A lot of world changes take place during this time, and a lot of stuff that we are most familiar with in our story, our histories and such, take place at this time. So let's take a look at it. This is the area time between the Testaments, from the end of Malachi, at the end of the Old Testament, as we know it, our Hebrew scriptures, all the way to the beginning of the New Testament. So basically 540 BC to 4 BC. Actually, well, never mind. I won't go there today. So what happens, though, is there's a major change on the world scene after the end of Malachi. The Persians are the dominant empire. They've taken over from the Babylonians, and they've been ruling the world. But over in Helena, what we know as Greece, a new player emerges, and this is Philip of Macedonia. He leads the beginning of the Greek opposition to the Persian dominance. And so he starts organizing these Greek city-states to come together. Now, he's eventually assassinated, but his son, Alexander, takes over. We know him as Alexander the Great. 356 to 323 BC, yeah. And Alexander organizes them and unifies the Greek states, and in the course of several years, defeats the Persian Empire, the mightiest empire in the world. He beats them. And not only does he defeat them, he keeps going. And by the time he's 32 years old, he has conquered the world. And then he dies, probably of a fever on his way back to Greece. But you can see just how extensive his empire was, going from Helena, where they started, modern day Greece, to Egypt, all the way over to the Indus River, to the shores, to the edge of India, as we know it. And he governs the world. I mean, he takes it over. And not only do you conquer it, now you got to govern it. So that was the other thing. He had to keep putting in place an administrative system as he kept moving east across the world. Now, after he dies, everything is under Greek control. And by 333, Judea is under Greek control. And with this comes the rise of Hellenism, the spread of Greek culture. This becomes the dominant culture of that part, that whole, what we knew as, what they know as the world. Everything is subordinate to, well, everything follows Greek ways, Greek philosophy, Greek thinking, everything. And after his death, 5 generals divide up the world. And what's important for us is the Ptolemies take over Egypt, and the Seleucids take over what's called Syria. They're going to eventually unify. These other 3 will finally get pushed out. You know, these will be the 2 dominant players. So his empire is split up into 5 pieces. And it's a Hellenistic world now. Greek culture dominates everything. And the Greek city-states are little outposts of Greek culture in these other countries, in these other parts of the world. In the midst of other cultures, there is this little citadel of Greek life called a city-state. And within that city-state, everything is Greek. Outside of it, whatever the local culture is, but in that city, everything is dominated by Greek life and Greek culture. Greek becomes the universal language. If you speak Greek, you can go anywhere in that empire and you will be understood. You don't have to learn the local dialect. It was the lingua franca, if you will, of the ancient world. Now, in the midst of it are the Jews. And for the Jews, there are three centers of influence. And of course, the first and most obvious is Judah, where they live, where Jerusalem is located. And they're free to worship God the way they wish. That's one major center. The second is Egypt, Alexandria. Egypt is ruled by the Ptolemy dynasty, and there's relative freedom. They're subject, of course, to the Egyptian king. The third center is Syria, which is ruled by the Seleucid dynasty. This is the one that's going to impact Judaism in a negative way. Antiochus IV will be the most important ruler of that Seleucid dynasty. And by 198, the Seleucids have gained complete control of Palestine. They are governing it. Not that there was another general, I forget which one it was. But the Seleucids have become the dominant power in that part of the world. So that's 198. 20 years later, or 30 years later, in 167 BC, Antiochus IV declares himself to be divine. He calls himself Antiochus Epiphanes, the God incarnate. And this does not sit well with the Jews, as you can imagine. They are quite upset, and he demands their worship. I'm God, worship me, he's saying. And to prove his point, in 167 BC, he slaughters a pig on the altar in the temple at Jerusalem. Now remember, that's an unclean animal. That's not kosher. God was very specific in what animal could be used as a sacrifice, and the pig doesn't enter at all. So this is a massive insult and affront to the Jews. And he's sending his minions around to make sure the people worship him in the various places around Judah. And when one of them goes to the place where a guy named Judas Maccabeus is living, they not only they refuse, they kill the messenger and begin a revolt. So the rebels are led by Judas Maccabeus, which means Judas the Hammer, and his sons. Judas dies after a short time, but his sons take over and lead the revolt known as the Maccabean Revolt. It lasts for 3 years, and they win. They drive the Seleucids out and take over control of the city. The story is told in the book of First Maccabees, which is the story of the rebellion. It's in the Apocrypha. So in 164 BC, the Maccabean forces retake Jerusalem. So now they are self-governing. And in the process, the Jewish state is freed. The temple is cleansed and rededicated. And that's also the root of the celebration of the Feast of Hanukkah, which we know comes in our December. This is where it comes from. Now, the Hasmonean family, that's the descendants of Judas Maccabeus and his sons. The Hasmonean family governs Judah, and they want to keep the control. Now, most of the Apocrypha will be written before or after this period. So if you want to know what's in the Apocrypha, well, there's the book of Maccabees, First Esdras, it was the history of from King Josiah and the reforms of that were brought about when they found the book of Deuteronomy, down to Zerubbabel, who brought the people back from exile. That's followed by Second Esdras, which is an apocalypse about suffering and how the people have to maintain their faith in the midst of it. Tobit is a story of Tobit and Anna and Tobias and Sarah. It's a love story. Judith is a story about hope in the face of oppression. There are additions to the book of Esther. In the book of Esther, in our Bible, the name of God is never used once. So in additions to Esther, it gives a more religious slant on the story of how she became the queen under Ahasuerus, the Persian king, or we know him as Artaxerxes. The wisdom of Solomon is a prayer extolling wisdom. Wisdom of Ben Sira commends the pursuit of wisdom. Baruch tells us to repent and return to God, and the letter of Jeremiah tells us to have hope in the face of oppression in exile. There are additions to Daniel, the prayer of Azariah, and the Song of the Three Young Men, which is It's supposed to be their prayer when they were standing at the fiery furnace. Story of Susanna is a woman's virtue vindicated. Bel and the dragon ridicules false gods and idols. The prayer of Manasseh, Judah's wicked king repents, and they're all written about the exile in Babylon, but it's written to encourage people in face of pagan persecution, which is what's happening under the Seleucids. So now we've got 164 onward. The Jews are independent. They are their own people again. But the scene is changing. Big change is coming. In 180 BC, the Ptolemies down in Egypt invite Rome to share control of Egypt. So they'd rather have a joint venture rather than be defeated themselves. So Rome comes down and starts, it's a joint governing system set up. The big change will come as we go forward. Seleucus still controls Syria. But what we're seeing is, by this time, by 180, 164, the reign of the Hellenists is fading. And there's a new player on the scene. Yeah, this guy, Julius Caesar. The new power is Rome. And in 48 BC, he makes himself Caesar, makes himself the emperor. He takes control from the Senate and is the absolute ruler. And now Rome rules the world. So the Hasmoneans have been ruling since 164, but by 63, there's a lot of conflict in the country, and they're worried that they're going to lose their power. So they cut a deal. They don't want to give it up. They don't want to give up their power. So they go to the obvious source. They make a treaty with Rome and invite Rome in to rule them. So Rome comes in and conquers without a fight. They are invited to come in. And now the name of the country is no longer Judah. Now it's Judea, the land of the Jews. Caesar Augustus comes on after Julius Caesar is killed. And by 30, he has made Egypt a province of Rome, not just a joint venture, but an actual part of the Roman Empire. Augustus is a Caesar, and there's been a long civil war after Caesar's death. There's a lot of bloodshed. But now, by 30 BC, Rome controls the world. Just before that, in 37, Caesar appointed a new king for Judea. They are now ruled by a Roman governor, and their king is only half Jewish. This is Herod the Great. He's appointed king of the Jews in 37 by the Romans. And Herod is brutal in his exercising control. He ends up with 10 wives by the time he dies. About, I think it's 2 BC now. We're 2 or 3 BC. We're pretty sure. But his second wife is Miriam, and she's the daughter of John Hyrcanus, who was one of the old Hasmonean rulers. But there is a lot of palace intrigue going on, a lot of plots behind his back, and he makes sure that nobody takes him out. So he executes all the Hyrcanus family and his wife, Miriam, and his sons to make sure they don't plot against him, which leads Caesar Augustus to declare it is safer to be Herod's pig than his son, because he doesn't kill his pigs. Meanwhile, Herod is making big changes. He rebuilds the temple at Jerusalem. This is a massive undertaking. Let's not minimize this. This is huge. And it's over twice the size of Solomon's. So he's cleared, urban renewal. Yeah, he cleared a massive chunk of the city in order to build this temple. It's all white stone and gold leaf, and it's a centerpiece of Jerusalem, and it's a center focus of the life for the Jews. Everything points to the temple. Everything, all life revolves around it. It's one of the wonders of the ancient world. It was begun in 19 BC, and it took 47 years to finish it. So when Jesus is there, it's still under construction. And it's a marvel of the ancient world. He used it to unify the people. He wanted it to he did it so he could make himself popular, because, he's not even a real Jew, they're saying. So he does this to buy their allegiance. And this is the court of the Gentiles around here. This is where anybody can enter. And once you get to this point, then you have to be a Jew to go inside. So when Jesus cleanses the temple, it's this area out here that he will cleanse. And it stands until 70 AD. But when the city of Jerusalem is sacked by the Romans at the end of their siege, the 3-year siege, they pulled all down except for the western wall, which is what we see today in Jerusalem, what we think of as the Wailing Wall. That's all that's left of that original structure. So now we see the rise of sects in Judaism during this period, this intertestamental period. We have the rise of the Pharisees. They are the separate. They really work hard at following God's law and obeying God. They also believe in the afterlife. They believe in the resurrection to heaven. Okay, that's important to keep in mind. They're very conservative. There's another group beyond them called the Hasidim, the pure. The Haaretz are the people of the land. That's just the commoners. So they're viewed by the elite as the riffraff, but that's the Haaretz. The Herodians are Hellenizers. They've abandoned Judaism and adopted Greek ways. So they are they don't even follow Judaism. They like being Greek. So they don't keep kosher. They don't do any of that stuff. The Sadducees are members of the Sanhedrin. They are also the collaborators with Rome in return for power and wealth. Now, whereas the Pharisees believe in an afterlife, the Sadducees do not. This life is all there is in their thinking. And the last group that we have are the Zealots. And these are the characters these are the revolutionaries. They're the people trying to fight the Romans any way they can. It's a Roman world, but the Greek culture persists. It's said that Rome's army conquered Greece, but Greek culture conquered Rome. So even though everything is Latin and Roman and all this, Greek language and Greek culture is still the dominant force. And it will be for quite a while. The world adopted Greek culture, Greek philosophy, dress, recreation, mores, games. So it's still this mix, this hodgepodge, if you will, during the Roman era. So Roman citizens govern the world and they rule it. But 1/3 of the population, 1/3 are slaves. And the highest honor was to be a Roman citizen. People dreamt of this. They worked their whole lives to buy their citizenship. If you're a naturalized American, you know what that feels like to work so hard for it. It takes years. For those you don't know, it takes years to become an American citizen. You have to work hard at it. And by the time a naturalized citizen is recognized and gets their citizenship papers, I'll guarantee you they know more about our government and our Constitution than most of us do. This is why Paul's being a Roman citizen makes such a huge difference in his ministry, because he's part of the elite. He's a citizen, and that meant really important. So the Jews are spread across the ancient world, and this is what we call the diaspora. The term is still used for any group who's dispersed around the world. But they're going from Alexandria, Egypt, to Damascus, Syria, to Babylon, Greece and Rome, all the way to Spain, Gaul, North Africa. Remember, this is all Roman world now. This parallels the world of Rome, and the Jews are spread all through that. And there are major colonies at all these places. So there are more Jews outside of Judea than there are inside Judea. In fact, there's more Jews at Alexandria than there are in Jerusalem. So it's a very dispersed scene now. So when Jesus is coming along and entering the scene, we find out that the Jews are all across the ancient world. And the Torah now, the law, becomes the center of life. And so you meet in the synagogue and you discuss the law. And then once in a while, you get to make that long journey back to Jerusalem for one of the festivals. In fact, the last line in the Seder at Passover is next year in Jerusalem. The dream was to go to Jerusalem for the festivals. Well, Torah is now the focus of life. And but that it ends up becoming trying to keep the law and working hard to be obedient rather than living with God. It's a strange situation that arises. At the same time, we get the rise of Messianism and apocalypticism. Messianism is the hope in the coming of God's anointed one to deliver God's people. So the Christ or the Messiah is the anointed one of God who will come to deliver the people. And there was a longing and expectation of this, and watching for it, looking for it, trying to figure out, read the signs. With that comes the rise of apocalypticism. This is the belief that God will intervene and deliver his people from the oppressor. And in the end, God's people will be delivered and receive blessed life, and the oppressor will go to hell. Daniel is an example of an apocalypse, and of course, the Revelation of St. John, the last book of our New Testament, is an apocalypse about Jesus. So the apocalypse is going to purport to reveal the future in veiled terms. And it sustains hope for people in the face of hopelessness and oppression. It affirms that God rules when it seems like all is lost. Remember, God is still in control, and God will rule on the day of judgment, and God will bring this world to an end. And in the end, the righteous will go to live with God, and the evil oppressors will be sent to perdition. That's where things are setting at this time. So it's sustained by their eschatology. The Jews wait for the end times. And in the meantime, they kept the law. So what we have, as the scene is unfolding for us, the people have sold their souls for political protection. The priesthood is now bought. The temple was built by a king who's only half Jewish. And the nation dreams of a Messiah, which sets the stage for Jesus and the church to the uttermost parts of the earth. So that's where we're going to start next week. We'll pick up with the story of Jesus, because we've come through, we're into a whole different kind of world now than we were at 540 BC. Now we're into this Hellenistic world where Rome is a dominant power, Rome's the occupier, Rome's the oppressor, and the people are waiting, hoping for a Messiah, somebody to come to deliver us. He will come. One day he shall come, the Lord's anointed. That's where we pick up the story next week as we continue with the Bible for Dummies, the story of looking at God's message to our world, and walking through the events, the storyline, as we continue our study here at Chapel by the Sea on Fort Myers Beach, Florida. I'm Dr. Jim Berger. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to seeing you next time as we continue our study and look at who we are and the story of our faith as it has come down to us through the ages. Thank you. God bless you. Have a joyous day.